This is lesson 8.4. It's called angle relationships. First, we're going to start with vocabulary. There's a lot of vocabulary in this lesson, and you need to know what those words mean in order to answer the question. Okay, so let's start with the vocabulary. Number one, the first word is congruent. Congruent. In geometry, congruent basically means kind of like equivalent. So congruent angles are angles that have the same measure. Okay, congruent kind of means equivalent. So congruent angles are angles that have the same measure. All right, next word we're going to try is vertical. No, actually, this one is adjacent. A-D-J-A-C-E-N-T. Adjacent. That's how you say that. Adjacent. Adjacent angles are a pair of angles, so two, a pair of angles that share a vertex and one side. The vertex is the point where the sides meet. Okay, so let's look at an angle just so you have an example. Let's look at angle AFE. AFE is an angle, right? This angle right here is AFE. AFE. The vertex is right here at F because the lines that cross, this line right here and this line right here, form this vertex where the angle F is. Okay? All right. So vertex is where two lines meet and they make a point. Okay? So adjacent angles are a pair of angles that share a vertex. That means one vertex is in both angles and they also share one side. Okay? So let's talk about vertical angles. Vertical angles are the opposite angles that are formed by two intersecting lines. Vertical angles are congruent. So vertical angles are going to have the same measure. Right, so that's all the words, but words don't mean a lot until you see what I'm talking about, okay? So we're going to focus on congruent, adjacent, and vertical. And remember, vertical angles are congruent. So vertical angles have the same measure. We're going to start by naming a pair of vertical angles. Okay, name a pair of vertical angles. Here's a pair right here, BFA, angle BFA is congruent to angle DFE. Angle DFE. Okay, so those are vertical angles. Okay, BFA and DFE. They are, so this line right here and this line right here cross each other, they intersect. And these angles are opposite each other across that point where they intersect. Those are vertical angles. So one way I remember vertical angles is this is like a V shape and this is like a V shape. And the 2 points of the V shapes, and V stands for vertical. So I remember these two are vertical. They're opposite angles of two intersecting lines. And remember, they are congruent. So name a pair of congruent angles. So angle BF. Uh-oh, I wrote BFC. BFC. No, BFA. This should say A. BFA right here is vertical to DFE. Okay, so BFA is congruent to angle DFE. They are vertical, and vertical angles are congruent. Okay, they're across from each other, opposite of each other from these two intersecting lines. Okay, so those are vertical angles. All right, Adjacent angles. Let's name a pair of adjacent angles. So let's take DFE, this angle right here, this angle. DFE, angle DFE, and one right next to it. So adjacent means they're right next to each other. EFA. All right, so this should say E. Okay, let's talk about the difference between adjacent and vertical. So the definition of adjacent says that a pair of angles that share a vertex and one side, that's critical. So you see that DFE and DFE and EFA, they have F, the same vertex F, but they also share this side. DFE and EFA, they share this vertex and this side. This side is in this angle and this side is in this angle. So that means they're adjacent. Basically, they're right next to each other. DFE, this side right here, EFE, this side right here, they both of those angles have this side and they have this vertex. That's what makes them adjacent. They're right next to each other. The vertical angles AFB and DFE, they also share a vertex, but they do not share a side because they're opposite each other, right? They don't have a side that they share. Like adjacent angles, these two angles share this side. That's what makes them adjacent. And they share the vertex F. The vertical angles BFA and DFE, they also share a vertex, but they do not share a side, okay? Vertical angles are across from each other. Adjacent angles are next to each other. Adjacent means next to, okay? All right, so, and then remember that vertical angles are congruent. So whatever this measure is, that's the same as this measure. This angle measures the same degrees as this angle here because they're vertical. All right, so more vocabulary. We're going to do supplementary, S-U-P-P-L-E-M-E-N-T-A-R-Y. Supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees, meaning they make a straight line. 180 degrees is a straight line, okay? Complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. Okay, so let's talk about that. Name a pair of supplementary angles. So I just pick a straight line. See this straight line right here, A to D? Well, what are the angles that make up that line? DFE plus EFA make this straight line. So this angle here, this is 180 degrees because it's a straight line. From here, I go all the way to here. That's 180 degrees. So this one, DFE, this angle right here, and this one, EFA, the angle right here, together, you add those together, they make this 180 degree angle. So a pair of supplementary angles would be DFE and EFA. Supplementary angles don't have to be right next to each other like that. These two happen to be adjacent, but they don't have to be. As long as their measures add up to 180, you have supplementary angles, okay? So complementary. So take a look here. This is a 90 degree angle right here, CFD. That's a 90 degree angle, all right? Now, here's what I know. CFA is also 90 degrees. The reason I know that is because from D to A is 180, right? So this here is 90, which means from C over to B over to A, that also must be 90 because 90 plus 90 is 180. All right, so I'm going to use a pencil real quick. This one is 90, so this also has to be 90 because 90 plus 90 makes 180, which makes the straight line. So what we have is this angle CFA. This part of it right here is 50. Well, this part of it right here, 50 plus x must be 90. So the two angles that make 90 are BFC and BFA. Okay, those two together, the 50 and the x, has to be 90. And it has to be 90 for the reason I explained. We know because of this little box that this side is 90, which means this side is also 90, both of these two angles together. So 50 plus this, whatever this measure is, has to be 90. So those two angles make a 90, which means they're complementary. Complementary angles make a 90 degree. So what is the measure of AFB? Well, we know that 50 plus x has to be 90, right? So 50 plus x equals, I'll write it in pen, 50, this here, plus x has to be 90. So if I subtract 50 from both sides, x is going to equal 40 degrees, okay? Which means AFB, angle AFB is 40 degrees, okay? So what you need to know though is what the words are, because they're going to ask you to find congruent angles or find complementary angles or find two angles that are adjacent or find two angles that are vertical. So make sure you really understand what these words mean and use your notes.